News focus is on two big connected themes: a new Board of Peace meeting. President Trump is expected to preside over in Washington, and reports of the U.S. increasing its military presence in the Middle East amid pressure on Iran over nuclear negotiations. It matters because it combines diplomacy, reconstruction planning, and the very real risk, at least as described in this segment, of escalation into a wider conflict. According to the segment, the Board of Peace meeting is being framed as a first-of-its-kind gathering, with key questions on the table including the disarmament of Hamas, who would provide peacekeeping forces, and how reconstruction would be funded if Hamas lays down weapons. The report also referenced Jared Kushner previously discussing humanitarian and rebuilding-related ideas, with the broader message that security is seen as necessary before prosperity. On the military side, the report described the U.S. as ramping up its regional posture. It mentioned the USS Gerald R. Ford strike group moving toward the Mediterranean and dozens of fighter jets heading to the region. The segment also said top national security officials met in the White House Situation Room to discuss planning and cited an Axios report suggesting first strikes could potentially come soon and could become a larger campaign than a previous more limited operation. The discussion then brought in former CIA station chief Dan Hoffman, who said the U.S. message to Iran is that if negotiations are not conducted in good faith, the U.S. is prepared to launch kinetic strikes. Senator Ted Cruz was also quoted saying the U.S. would not be looking at a ground invasion with hundreds of thousands of troops. The segment also referenced Iran conducting drills with Russia, framing that as a signal of leverage. If you're an average viewer, I think it's normal to feel pulled in two directions here. On one hand, there's something appealing about any plan that even tries to coordinate peacekeeping and reconstruction after a war, because the alternative is often drift, chaos, and repeated cycles of violence. On the other hand, the same report that talks about peace planning is also talking about strike timelines and military buildup. That contrast can feel unsettling, like the peace track and the pressure track are running at the same time. One viewpoint is that visible military positioning is meant to deter conflict, basically, talk seriously because the U.S. has options. People who think that way might see the buildup as a negotiating tactic designed to prevent Iran from stalling and to avoid a longer war later. Another viewpoint is that these moments can be dangerously fragile. When assets move, rhetoric hardens, and timelines get discussed publicly, misunderstandings become more likely. Even if nobody wants a wider conflict, it can become easier to stumble into one. And for many civilians, whether in the region or watching from far away, the fear is that escalation tends to create consequences that are hard to contain. A constructive takeaway is that the Board of Peace concept, at least as described here, is trying to grapple with practical questions, like security, demilitarization, peacekeeping, and rebuilding, rather than only making broad statements. That's a positive, because plans live or die on details. But a reasonable concern is that the report leaves major uncertainties unresolved. Who enforces demilitarization? Who is trusted to keep the peace? Who pays and under what conditions? And how do you prevent reconstruction from becoming temporary if security collapses again? Those aren't cynical questions. Those are the questions that determine whether rebuilding becomes lasting progress or just another pause between crises. So where does that leave us? For me, it's a reminder to watch what leaders do as much as what they say, whether diplomacy moves forward, whether the peace meeting produces clear next steps, and whether military pressure is used as leverage or becomes the main event. However you feel about it, it's worth staying cautious, staying informed, and resisting the urge to jump to absolute conclusions based on early signals.